Captain Ibrahim Traoré built the biggest airport in Africa that got the West panicking. Nobody saw it coming. Not the people of Burkina Faso. Not the African Union. And definitely not the West. But on a hot, dusty afternoon in early March, Captain Ibrahim Traoré walked into a quiet military meeting and dropped a sentence that would shake the continent. "We are going to build the biggest international airport Africa has ever seen right here, in Burkina Faso." The room went silent. A few people blinked in confusion. One advisor laughed nervously, thinking it was a joke. But Traoré didn't smile. He leaned forward, looked them all in the eye, and repeated himself word for word. The others looked at each other. Burkina Faso? A country under sanctions, surrounded by insecurity, rebuilding from the ground up? An airport of that scale? Most thought he was dreaming too big. But Traoré had already made up his mind. He wasn't thinking about Burkina Faso's past. He was thinking about its future and how for too long, African skies had belonged to outsiders. How flights between two African countries often had to go through Paris or Brussels. How West African air travel was shaped not by Africans, but by Europeans and Americans with power and money. He was tired of it. The people were tired of it. And now, he was ready to do something no other African leader had dared. He called the plan Project Sankara Skies, named after Burkina Faso's revolutionary hero, Thomas Sankara. But this wasn't just about flights or buildings. It was about freedom, ownership, dignity, a new era. Traoré didn't go to the IMF. He didn't beg for international loans. He didn't fly to France or the United States. Instead, he sent letters hand-signed and sealed to African architects, engineers, and planners across the continent. He wrote to a young woman in Kenya who had designed Nairobi's solar airports. To a Ghanaian runway engineer who had been working in Dubai. To a Nigerian firm known for building smart cities. His message was simple. Come home. Build with us. And they came. Quietly, without media attention, without headlines. Africans from across the continent packed their tools and flew to Burkina Faso not for money or fame, but because they believed in something bigger. They saw a leader who wasn't waiting for permission. Construction began in secret. Just outside Ouagadougou, in a wide stretch of barren land, workers arrived before sunrise and stayed until after sunset. Military engineers poured concrete. Local villagers hauled sand. Women cooked meals for the workers. The entire project became a community effort. There were no press conferences. No flashy ribbon cutting. But every single day, the airport was taking shape. Within 6 months, 3 massive runways were under construction, longer than anything in West Africa. The main terminal was designed to look like a Sankara beret from above. And in the center of it all, a control tower, powered entirely by solar energy, rose like a symbol of African independence. Then the world started paying attention. Satellite images showed strange patterns of development. International analysts were confused. Is it a Russian military base? Some asked. Is it a Chinese mining zone? Others guessed. When French newspapers caught wind of the airport, they called it a provocation. Western media accused Traoré of trying to isolate Burkina Faso from its allies. But none of it mattered. Because on the ground, people were working. People were building. And for the first time in a long time, people were dreaming again. One worker, a 22-year-old mason from Bobo Dioulasso, was asked why he volunteered to help build an airport he might never even use. He said, "Because my children deserve to fly without begging another country." Another woman, a street food vendor near the construction site, added, "They said we are too poor to do this. But look, we're doing it. Brick by brick." By the time the first test landing strip was complete, over 5,000 Burkinab had worked on the site, directly or indirectly. It was no longer just a construction zone. It was a movement. Burkina Faso, a country once overlooked, was now making history. And Traoré? He didn't make long speeches. He didn't try to impress foreign powers. He simply watched the work, quietly, confidently. This is not just an airport, he told a group of students during a surprise visit. It's a message. To every African child who was told to stay small. To every nation told they had to wait. We're done waiting. He didn't need applause. The sound of drills and hammers was enough. The rising walls, the steel beams, the laughter of workers, all of it was louder than any speech. Burkina Faso was building more than a runway. It was building a runway to freedom. And the world, whether it liked it or not, would have no choice but to watch the skies that finally belonged to Africa. By the time the world found out what was happening in Burkina Faso, it was already too late. A massive structure was rising from the dusty outskirts of Ouagadougou, an airport so grand, so unexpected, that global powers couldn't believe it was real. But Captain Ibrahim Traoré had been planning it for months. In silence. With no foreign contracts. No dependency. And no permission from the West. It was a war, but not of bullets and bombs. This was a concrete war. A war to break the grip of old colonial systems. A war against dependency, debt, and foreign control. And Captain Traoré had chosen to fight it using bricks, steel, and vision. The construction site looked like a military base. Workers moved in silence. Trucks came and went at night. Military engineers led operations, guarded by elite units who ensured no unauthorized footage leaked. Phones were banned. Drones were shot down. There was zero press coverage. It wasn't just about secrecy, it was about protection. Because the stakes were higher than anyone imagined. Every week, another section of the airport came alive. The solar-powered control tower reached higher. The runways stretched longer. And all of it, every brick, every cable, was sourced from African hands. The architecture was revolutionary. The main terminal was shaped like a Sankara beret from the sky, symbolizing defiance and unity. The arrival hall featured West African patterns carved into massive concrete walls. Instead of imported marble, the floors were laid with polished Burkina stone. Every corner of the structure screamed one truth: this belongs to us. But as the project grew, so did the pressure. Foreign intelligence agencies started making noise. France's embassy quietly requested a site tour under the excuse of diplomatic curiosity. The US issued vague travel warnings for Burkina Faso. News outlets started publishing theories. Some claimed it was a secret Chinese airbase. Others called it a Russian arms hub. The truth? It was a Pan-African miracle, and it terrified them. Because for the first time in decades, an African country was building a mega infrastructure project without any Western fingerprints. No IMF loans. No World Bank consultants. No colonial strings attached. And it wasn't just Burkina Faso. Soon, leaders from Mali, Guinea, Niger, and Chad came for secret meetings. They pledged full support. They saw what Traoré was building, not just an airport, but an African aviation hub that could bypass Europe entirely. Together, they made a historic decision. They would reroute their international air traffic through Burkina Faso and shift away from old colonial systems controlled by foreign airlines. The West was furious. Overnight, international bank accounts linked to the project were frozen. Some materials ordered from Europe were suddenly blocked due to security concerns. International media went on the attack, calling the airport a dangerous political statement. But Traoré did not flinch. Instead, he accelerated the project. He launched a crash program to train local aviation staff, air traffic controllers, engineers, ground technicians. He opened night schools at military bases where young Burkinab could learn airport operations and management. Even villagers were offered jobs and short-term training to work at the site. In less than 10 months, the airport went from dust to dominance. By the time the first private test flight landed, the scale of the airport shocked the world. 3 runways, each capable of handling the world's largest cargo planes. A cargo village bigger than the one at Nairobi's JKIA. Hangars that could hold up to 10 international planes. A fully solar-powered energy system. And a private terminal reserved only for African presidential aircrafts. This wasn't just an airport. It was a challenge to the global order. And that's when the West launched its final move: propaganda. Major newspapers across Europe released articles claiming Burkina Faso's airport threatens regional stability. They accused Traoré of turning Burkina Faso into a rogue state. Editorials warned that African unity was becoming dangerous. And some even went as far as suggesting the airport was a gateway for terrorism. But on the ground, the reality was different. People were proud. People were energized. Young men who used to dream of escaping to Europe were now working on radar systems. Women who once sold firewood were now employed in logistics and catering. It wasn't just infrastructure. It was dignity. One airport worker, 26-year-old Hamadou, said it best during an interview. "This is the first time I've worked on something that makes me feel free. Not borrowed freedom. Real freedom." Another woman, Aminata, who cooked food daily for workers, told a journalist. "They said we needed help from outside. But look around, we're helping ourselves." In the final days of construction, before the opening ceremony, Traoré stood alone on the longest runway as the sun began to set. He didn't say a word. He just stared into the golden horizon, watching the reflection of the terminal glass shimmer like a rising phoenix. It was almost ready. Africa was about to take off on its own terms. It was the day the world had been waiting for, some with excitement, others with fear. But for the people of Burkina Faso, it was the day history was written with wings. From the crack of dawn, thousands of Burkinab flooded the roads leading to the new airport. Some came by motorcycle, some on foot, and others with wooden carts, bringing food, water, and drums. The air smelled of dust, roasted peanuts, and something else, hope. This wasn't just an airport launch. This was a national rebirth. The sun climbed steadily over the golden rooftops of Ouagadougou as the final flags were raised along the airport gates. Red, green, and gold fluttered against the wind. The name of the airport stood boldly at the entrance. Aéroport International Thomas Sankara. Our sky. Our future. The security was tight, but the atmosphere was electric. Traditional dancers lined the walkways. Drummers played ancient rhythms that echoed across the tarmac. Mothers wept silently. Children waved paper planes made of colored cardboard. And then the convoy appeared. A long line of black armored jeeps rolled up slowly. At the center, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, dressed in a simple dark green military uniform. No golden chains. No foreign diplomats. No exaggerated protocol. Just the leader of a new kind of Africa. As he stepped out of the vehicle, people broke into spontaneous applause. No one had told them to clap. They just couldn't hold it in. He wasn't a president behind bulletproof glass. He was a man who had built something no one believed was possible. Traoré stood still for a moment, taking it all in. He didn't look left or right. His eyes were fixed on the runway, clean, shining, silent, waiting. He walked slowly to the stage, where local chiefs, women leaders, and youth representatives sat beside him. There were no foreign flags. No Western guests. Not even a translator. He cleared his throat and spoke. "Today is not about me. It's not about power. It's not even about Burkina Faso alone. Today is about something they told us we could never do. They told us we needed them to build. That we needed loans, approvals, consultants. They told us that we, Africans, couldn't touch the skies unless they gave us wings. But today, you're standing on a runway built by your own hands. And soon, we will watch the first African-owned aircraft take off from African land, through African air, heading toward an African future." The crowd exploded into cheers. Some cried. Some prayed. Then, without fanfare, the loud hum of engines rolled in from the distance. It was time. A massive Air Afrique aircraft, recently reborn from the ashes of Africa's forgotten airline, began taxiing down the runway. Painted in bold black, red, and gold, with the words "Owned by Africa" on its wings, the plane glided into position. Its flight path was symbolic: Ouagadougou, Addis Ababa, Sao Paulo, Havana. Africa. South America. The global South, connected without Europe in between. And just like that, the plane began to move. Faster. Louder. Stronger. The crowd held their breath. As it lifted off the ground, the moment froze in time. For the first time in modern history, an international airport built entirely by Africans, for Africans, launched its first intercontinental flight without permission from the West. People cheered so loud that birds scattered from nearby trees. Elders raised their hands toward the sky. Children screamed with joy. A group of women fell to their knees, chanting the name of Thomas Sankara, as if he had returned. That night, international headlines rolled in. Burkina Faso stuns world with historic airport opening. Africa rewrites aviation map without the West. The most important takeoff since independence. But while the media tried to catch up, the people already understood. Something had changed, and there was no going back. That airport wasn't just made of steel and concrete. It was made of pain, resistance, sweat, and pride. It was the product of centuries of silence finally turning into a roar. A week later, 4 new African countries signed agreements to use the Sankara airport as a regional hub. Air Afrique announced plans to expand its fleet to 12 new planes. Pan-African aviation schools began enrolling youth from across the continent. But perhaps the most powerful moment came days later, during a visit from a group of Burkina students. A little boy, no older than 9, stood before Captain Traoré and asked, "Will I be able to fly to Ghana one day without stopping in France?" Traoré knelt, placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, and replied, "No, son. You'll fly to Ghana, to Kenya, to Brazil, wherever you want. You don't need their sky anymore. Now, we have our own." If this story inspired you, share it. Tell the world, Africa is not waiting anymore. We are building. We are rising. We are flying. Subscribe for more real stories they don't want you to hear.